Everyone, this is the Gardening Snail of Livingston, California, just trying to keep the community informed and local governments as honest as possible. In this video, we will briefly touch on the replacement of Tom Hallinan as the city attorney for the City of Livingston, and briefly go over the parts of the invoice from the December 2022 invoice of White Brenner that I was allowed to see. I've mentioned in previous videos that I'm not being given redacted copies of the entire invoice. There seems to be some charges that White Brenner does not want you or I to see. While I can understand there might be some detail having to do with cases that are still active that might need to be kept confidential, I don't understand why I'm not being given the invoice totals, even without all the details. For example, here is an excerpt from a warrant register that shows totals billed for the month of November 2022. When I match them up to the totals from the invoice I had been given for November, I can see I had been given the totals for General Municipal, Human Resources, Public Records Act, and Police, but the nearly $4,000 of what I'm calling hidden charges were classified as confidential by White Brenner. We know from City Council meeting agendas that there are multiple litigations that are active at the moment. In addition to the former city manager's litigation, there is also the former police chief's litigation, the Animal Legal Defense Fund litigation, and a fair few of potential litigations. But what this nearly $4,000 went towards, we're not supposed to be allowed to know. At least not from the invoices. We'll need to do more digging through warrant registers or other city reports to get an actual total. With that in mind, we're going to do a quick scan through what I was allowed to have, then briefly go over the agenda items at council meetings to get an idea of what we're paying for, even if they don't allow us to know how much we're paying for it. From December 1st through the 7th on the first page of General Municipal Services, there were no redactions. These were the redactions for tasks done between December 12th and the 15th. These would be the redactions between the 15th and December 21st. No redactions between the 21st and 22nd on this page, although here is where we notice some staffing changes at White Brenner. One of the things you will notice is that there are no charges by Tom Hallinan. He's been replaced by Christina Pritchard. Ms. Pritchard is one of White Brenner's newest attorneys, although she has worked for the firm for some time as a law clerk while going to law school. This shows an amount of retainer applied of $2,700. The Human Resources portion of the invoice is heavily redacted as usual. The only thing we're really allowed to see is discussions about acting city manager compensation and interim city manager recruitment. Personnel issues are mentioned, with Christina Pritchard billing most of the hours, and the grand total of $5,445, most of that being redacted. Now let's move on to take a brief look at what happened at City Council in the month of December, because a lot of what goes on the agenda ends up on the legal invoice. The December 6th regular meeting included presentations to the outgoing members of the council, a whole bunch of meeting minutes, the confirmation of election results, discussing how to fill a vacancy created on the city council, and discussing whether or not council members should be allowed to continue phoning it in to council meetings in the future. And under closed session at the very end of the newly installed city council would be a performance appraisal of the city manager. That makes two on the same evening. There was a special meeting on December 6th. On the agenda, conference with labor negotiator and a performance of value of the city manager that replaced Jose Ramirez. If I remember correctly, the city council reorganization ended up being pushed into the regular meeting. 2 days later, on December 8th, there was another special meeting. This one included a public employee discipline dismissal release and conference with labor negotiator. and discussing and potentially authorizing city staff to publish a request for qualifications for the position of interim city manager. And the agenda for December 20th included topics such as setting aside money for ethics training, the Gilton solid waste contract, a sidewalk project, labor negotiations, and a whole bunch of litigation. Now that we've gone over what was talked about at council meetings for the month of December, let's take a look at some of what White Brenner is actually going to let us see what we got billed for. Starting out with a long list of lawyers and how much of their charges were redacted. I've put together this little spreadsheet, and here we can see that 100% of the charges by the zoning, development agreement, water, and land use attorneys were redacted. Again, I'd like to point out that Tom Hallinan is out and Christina Pritchard is in. Now let's start looking at what we paid for to get items on to City Council meeting agendas. A couple of these items having to do with virtual City Council meetings and remote attendance by council members. Also addressing the vacancy created on the council and the interim city manager position, plus conferring about what the council directed the city attorney to do at the December 20th meeting. Charges that we can see added up to $850. Moving on to charges for attending council meetings. Keeping in mind that the city manager performance appraisals and employee discipline, dismissal, or release was on the agenda. And total for attending meetings ended up at $2,080. I will note that I did not see anything for attending office hours, but I can't say whether or not office hours are hidden under one of their redactions. Let's look at charges for closed session items. There's conferencing with the human resources specialist in preparation for closed sessions. Keep in mind, the interim city manager position was a closed session discussion item, as well as labor negotiations, employee discipline, release, and existing litigation, plus anticipated litigation. Then there's election results. We see the charges for reviewing and finalizing the staff report and resolution, but I don't recall seeing how much we were charged for the original draft. If we go back to November, we see where it was reviewed and finalized on the 30th. Well, I guess they had to review and revise it and finalize it in December all over again. I can only guess that the hours billed for the original draft are hidden under a redaction somewhere. There's an email about office hours, some analyzing of outstanding tasks to be completed, and conferencing about attending planning commission meetings. More conferring with either, I'm assuming, the acting city manager or other attorneys in the firm, as well as a charge related to a Public Records Act request. Of the nearly $7,000 we were charged for general municipal, we're only allowed to see the detail of about $4,000 worth. If you like what I do here, please follow me on Facebook and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the notifications bell so you're notified whenever a new video is uploaded. And don't forget the disclaimer, editorial content and historical recollections are my own as a resident of Livingston and City Council watcher since at least 2007, and does not represent the views and opinions of the City Council or the City of Livingston, and sure does not represent any kind of legal advice.